You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Hi, Coven friends.
Hi, witches.
Oh, it's episode 1 of season 3. I can't believe it.
Welcome to season 3 of the Missing Witches podcast.
We didn't even think we would make it to the end of season 1.
We certainly didn't think anyone would be listening.
No. Or that we would ever have a sponsor, let alone a soulmate sponsor.
Let's talk about our sponsor. Okay, so we went looking for, maybe you guys heard on the Llama special, we did a call out as anti-capitalists who still like to eat food and pay rent.
And buy a shit ton of witch books.
And buy many books about witches. We put a call out for a sponsor, but someone that we could relate to on a personal level, an independent business, a witch business. And did we find one? Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. We got an email in our little inbox that just said, let's partner, y'all.
Let's partner, y'all. So, hi, Sammy. We are so very proud to announce that we have partnered for all of season 3 with Foxglove Farm. Now, that's foxglove, like the animal, like the thing you put on your hand.
Like the witch plant.
And farm, like pharmacy. So, FOXGLOVEPHARM. Go to Foxglove Farm and use offer code Missing Witches. We will be doing ad breaks in the Missing Witches episodes, but not in the Witches Found episodes, because we feel that those episodes are sponsored by our found witches themselves.
Yeah.
They give us their time and their energy and
we'll be telling you lots more about Foxglove Farm and this witch in her kitchen who's crafting these remedies and teas and spells and soaps and all of the cool ways she works in her community. We just adore her. I hope you guys are like Googling her website now and falling in love the way we did. Her Instagram is hilarious. She's the queen of witch memes. She makes me laugh every day. And her products are just beautiful and they help make the world better. And we're really excited that you're going to get some of those with our
sweepstakes, which I guess by now will have finished. So felicitation, congratulations to whoever won that. Her main focus, Sammy at Foxglove, is subscription boxes. Yeah. Now, when I first heard about this idea of subscription boxes, I was like, they're just going to put a pile of plastic junk that they couldn't sell into a box and send it to me, and I don't want that. But Foxglove is different. First of all, she barely even breaks even on these. This is a labor of love. She puts together these packages for what she calls her coven.
Yeah.
Bless. And it's all handmade stuff. It's no plastic junk that got left over from the last sale.
This is like lovingly crafted stuff for your season, like following the moons and the tides. Yeah, we feel really, really, really good about this partnership. Yeah.
And we'll talk more about it, but just remember, everybody, Foxglove Farms with a PH, offer code Missing Witches, and if you want to support Missing Witches, you can do so by buying yourself a present from Foxglove Farm. Yeah. What a wonderful way to support us, because of course, by supporting Foxglove Farm, you're supporting Missing Witches.
Yeah, and the whole community and the whole network, and we just want to keep doing more of that, and we'll tell you more about the schemes that we have for that.
Speaking of schemes, do you want to lay another scheme on us, Risa?
Oh, sure. Okay, so we do have another scheme. This is one of a couple that we're going to drop. We're also gonna launch a Patreon. Yeah, why not?
Support
Podcasts
us.
do Patreon. That's a thing.
And of course, I mean, you're all members of our coven, but if you want a little extra access to us and the gifts that we will be bestowing, and I'm not just talking philosophical gifts, like real material gifts.
Straight up gifts. Yeah, so if you don't know Patreon, if you're new to this idea, basically it's a way for people who love and support an artistic endeavor to contribute whatever amount of money they want to contribute to that endeavor a month. So people sometimes do these different tiers of membership, and we didn't have the patience to figure that out.
Also, non-hierarchical.
Not into it. So,
smash the hierarchy.
Yeah, so you can contribute $1 a month, or like probably $700 a month. I don't know.
Yeah, $700 a month sounds reasonable to me.
Somebody out there. No, I mean, or $3, you know. And we'll be in there. I'm going to try to be in there once or twice a week just with updates on the witchy happenings out in the woods and different things that we're writing and working and thinking about. And then everyone who joins, we have a treasure for you that we are screen printing today.
Handmade.
All our handmade magical goods, and we'll post photos of those in the Patreon. And then the other thing we're going to do is partner with other witch artists. So if you have a small witchy business and advertising is not really in your budget, but you want to get a shout out to a bunch of our supporters on social media and on Patreon, you could say, you reach out to us and be like, hey, I will offer something up for a draw from your Patreon supporters. And if we only have 3 Patreon supporters, guess what? Your odds are good.
Your odds are very good. Right, so not everybody has a lot of money to send around, but if you're like a bananas craft maker and your whole house is filling up with all the crafts that you've made, send some to us. That's an amazing way to support us, and we will use them as gifts. This idea
actually came to us from a letter from a listener, and we being excited. It's such a beautiful idea for how to shout out and support each other. So we want to do that. The other thing that we are going to do is pretty regularly, we'll do a draw from Patreon supporters, assuming we have any, and as soon as we have some. And we're going to send you a book from the Missing Witches library.
Yeah, we might even let you choose the witch.
Maybe. Or maybe not. But we will choose a book that we think you'll love, something that we read in researching an episode. We'll write a little inscription, maybe a little spell in it for you, and we'll send it off. We're really just super excited to meet you guys, meet our listeners, and to share the stuff that we've been reading that doesn't make it into the episode. So.
Right, and so many people have told us when the seasons end that they miss us. So this is, again, a great way to keep in touch with us all year long, between the seasons, between the Sabbats.
Yeah, someday, I know there's been requests on the Instagram for a coven conference or like someday. A sleepover or something. We promise you we dream of that too. That is not in the works for this year. But this is our way of kind of having that perpetual sleepover hang on the internet. So if you feel like joining us, go to patreon.com/missing witches /missing witches.
Let's say that one more time.
Patreon.com/missing witches.
And don't forget to go to Foxglove Farm and use that offer code Missing Witches for a very witchy 13% off of your order. Check out the subscription boxes.
They're so cool, guys.
They're so cool. Maybe you saw a picture of one of them on our Instagram. And we'll be doing an unboxing in a future episode as well. But for now, we just wanted to introduce Sammy and Foxglove Farm to you all. And again, if you want to support us, but you can't just send us some money, buy yourself a present from Foxglove Farm. And this is supporting Missing Witches. Isn't that amazing?
Magical. It's just magical.
So, without further ado, let's get to our stories. Now, we usually start the season with a tarot artist, just because that's how we started the first season. But this time, we found a witch who went farther back in time.
She takes us all the way back.
All the way back to around like 11,000 BC. So we thought that might be a good place to start season 3, 11,000 years ago, with the witch who changed our perspective on human history, who basically, not on her own, of course, but gave a scientific basis for contemporary feminist spirituality and how that integrated with earth-centered spirituality. And it's a person who was mocked,
maligned, discredited,
and then just 2 years ago proven magnificently correct. So keep that in your hearts, y'all. If they make fun of you, it's okay. It may take decades, but someday all the missing witches will be found.
And I think that's a theme for our season, is a story about, being not believed and then the feeling of the tides turning.
Yes, we will be believed.
And the tides will turn.
So join us now for the unbelievable yet totally believable story of Marija Gimbutas on Season 3 of the Missing Witches podcast. A persistent asker of why a child or dissident is often dismissed with, because it's always been that way. Historians are here to say no. These pieces of 1,000 or 10,000-year-old evidence say different. Things can change. Now, gentle listener, close your eyes and take that idea to its ultimate, where discoveries are made and theories are put forth that shift our very understanding of the world we live in, of the values of humanity. And in this world-shattering place, we find archaeologist Marija Gimbutas, a small, demure seeker, challenging our accepted history of human life on this planet. Let's start this story as far back as we can go. Somewhere between 11,000 and 3 million years ago. Okay, maybe that's too far back. Let's start this story in 1994 with the death of the great goddess excavator Marija Gimbutas. Her New York Times obituary went, in part, as follows. Perhaps her most controversial thesis was that the world was at peace during the Stone Age, when goddesses were worshipped and societies were centered on women. Then, the thesis went, about 6,000 years ago, a culture in which the two sexes lived in harmony was shattered by patriarchal invaders, and the worship of life-giving goddess was replaced by reverence for warlike gods. Her studies and interdisciplinary approach also created a new field, archaeomythology. Skepticism about her thesis was widespread among scholars, but her ideas were welcomed by many feminists and by Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. Writing about Gimbutas's book, The Language of the Goddess, Gerda Lerner, a historian at the University of Wisconsin, said that although Dr. Gimbutas's theory could never be proved, it could, quote, challenge and inspire and fascinate, simply by providing an imaginative alternative to male-centered explanations. What a legacy. May we all challenge, inspire, and fascinate. Marija has said, all I ever wanted was to find the truth. And she dug deep, literally and metaphorically, to uncover the truth. In her early life in Lithuania, she was a child of means, and this enabled her to pursue education of all varieties, an education that was not accessible to many people, let alone little girls. A proto-feminist such as we often see in the mothers of great witches, Marija's mother had a doctorate in ophthalmology from the University of Berlin and was the first female physician in Lithuania. Her father was also a doctor who published both a magazine and a newspaper. Marija said, "If you do not have a vision as a person, you cannot see much." Which almost feels like an inside joke once you know her mother was an eye doctor. Joan Marler wrote, Marija told me about an experience she had as a child, watching people work in traditional ways that began her own interest in the study of folklore and eventually ethnology and archaeology. Marija said, the old women used sickles and sang while they worked. The songs were very authentic, very ancient. At that moment, I fell in love with what is ancient because it was a deep communication and oneness with the earth. I was completely captivated. Marija fled Soviet-occupied and annexed Lithuania during World War II and made her way to Germany, where she continued her education at Tübingen University, earning a PhD. This background was a major influence on her later work because she refused to focus on one discipline. She studied linguistics, ethnology, and the history of religions, and this mixture would inform the basis for her cultural theories. In Marija's lifetime, Lithuania was ruled by Russia, then Poland, back to Russia, then Germany, and Russia again. So it makes sense that she would go looking for something more ancient than the occupations and borders she grew up with. In 1949, she moved to the United States and started working at Harvard University. Because she spoke multiple languages and had such an interdisciplinary knowledge base, she quickly became quite valuable to the Harvard faculty. In 1955, Marija was made a Fellow of Harvard's Peabody Museum, which is a lifetime honor. Marija joined the UCLA faculty in 1963, serving as professor of European archaeology until her retirement. But despite her new American home, her heart belonged to her motherland. Lithuania called, and Marija would direct 5 major archaeological excavations in southeastern Europe in her time at UCLA. It's fairly straightforward to dig up a site, find a pot, and announce, "These people made pots." But Gimbutas and others like her want to know more. Infer. So the question becomes, how to describe a culture purely from the material goods you find? How to find a pot and discover a whole society? It's tempting to hear this and go on a shopping spree that somehow our goods define us. And I think a lot of people feel this way, but in Marija's world, perhaps you'd be better off carving sigils into the stuff you already have. because the things that Marija found were simple objects, but not simply objects. In her gorgeous and encyclopedic book, The Language of the Goddess, she wrote, "The amazing repetition of symbolic associations through time and in all of Europe on pottery, figurines, and other cult objects has convinced me that they are more than geometric motifs. They must belong to an alphabet of the metaphysical." We see this happen with the pagan symbols that populate our, quote, Christian holidays. It's much easier to keep the symbols and remove or change the meaning to suit our need to control. And so it was, as Marija's theory contends, when the culture of war invaded the culture of peace. She wrote, "The bull is linked with regeneration, yet the figure is not a bull's head, but the female reproductive organs. The similarity is striking indeed." And so it was that the uterus and ovaries connected by fallopian tubes, a symbol of fertility, became the bull's head and horns, a symbol of virility, manliness, charging strength. Joseph Campbell was a well-known mythologist, writer, and professor of English literature who wrote the foreword to Marija's delicious volume of drawings, photographs, and analysis, The Language of the Goddess. As a mythologist and symbologist, Marija's research struck a chord with Joseph that you can hear ringing through his lovely and enthusiastically written introduction. He wrote, "As Jean-François Champollion, a century and a half ago, through his decipherment of the Rosetta Stone, was able to establish a glossary of hieroglyphic signs to serve as keys to the whole great treasury of Egyptian religious thought from circa 3200 BC to the period of the Ptolemies. So, in her assemblage, classification, and descriptive interpretation of some 2,000 symbolic artifacts from the earliest Neolithic village sites of Europe, circa 7,000 to 3,500 BC, Marija Gimbutas has been able not only to prepare a fundamental glossary of pictorial motifs as keys to the mythology of that otherwise undocumented era, but also to establish on the basis of these interpreted signs the main lines and themes of a religion in veneration, both of the universe as a living body of a goddess mother creator and of all the living things within it, as partaking of her divinity. A religion, one immediately perceives, which is in contrast to that of Genesis 3:19, where Adam is told by his father creator, "In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." In this earlier mythology, the earth out of which all these creatures have been born is not dust, but alive as the goddess creator herself. One cannot but feel that in the appearance of this volume at just this turn of the century that there is an evident relevance to the universally recognized need in our time for a general transformation of consciousness. The message here is of an actual age of harmony and peace in accord with the creative energies of nature, which for a spell of some 4,000 prehistoric years anteceded the 5,000 of that which James Joyce has termed the nightmare of contending tribal and national interests, from which it is now certainly time for this planet to wake. Signed, Joseph Campbell. Joseph famously inspired George Lucas in his creation of the Star Wars series, and I love this interplay. 1 degree of separation between Marija's artifacts and Lucas's science fiction. Everything is truly everything. From the Language of the Goddess. The reason for the great number and variety of old European images lies in the fact that this symbolism is lunar and chthonic, built around the understanding that life on earth is in eternal transformation, in constant and rhythmic change between creation and destruction, birth and death. The moon's 3 phases, new, waxing, and old, are repeated in trinities, or triple functional deities that recall these moon phases: maiden, nymph, and crone. Life-giving, death-giving, and transformational, rising, dying, and self-renewing. Life-givers are also death-wielders. Immortality is secured through the innate forces of regeneration within nature itself. The concept of regeneration and renewal is perhaps the most outstanding and dramatic theme that we perceive in this symbolism. It seems more appropriate to view all of these goddess images as aspects of the one great goddess with her core functions: life-giving, death-wielding, regeneration, and renewal. The obvious analogy would be to nature itself. Through the multiplicity of phenomena and continuing cycles of which it is made, one recognizes the fundamental and underlying unity of nature. The goddess is immanent rather than transcendent, and therefore physically manifest. The things that connect us all are the same things which exist now, just as they did, as they do, as they will. The things we share, the moon, sun, earth, and stars, are free to behold, free to connect with. There's no admission fee to look up at the sky, so while we impose meaning and rules and tariffs and borders that only serve to divide us, there shines the moon in perfect equality for everyone. So, while the moon is free to behold, sadly, podcasting is not free, but we are trying as hard as we can to keep Missing Witches free and accessible for everyone. So please check out our sponsor, Foxglove Farm, where you can subscribe to wonderful monthly gift boxes, or you can get teas, handmade soap.
Oh my gosh, teas with specific healing love worked into them. This witch in her kitchen is combining herbs with a lot of knowledge and a lot of care and a lot of ethical practices that make us feel really comfortable recommending them to you.
Extremely ethical practices. I mean, we went in, we don't want to be hypocrites, so we asked a lot of questions, and honestly, Sammy gave us every answer we were hoping for. It's cruelty-free. She gets her herbs and everything that she uses from the most ethical source she can find.
Yeah, it's palm oil free.
Mm-hmm.
Palm oil depresses the fuck out of me. I was so happy she said that.
Yes.
I love orangutans.
Yes. So again, I mean, we're so grateful and so lucky to be partnered with Foxglove Farm. Please go to foxglovefarm.com and use offer code Missing Witches for a super witchy 13% discount. We've seen the alchemy of combination so many times on this podcast. Pixie Smith with her illustration and divination, Maria Sabina with her poetry and magic mushrooms, Zora Neale Hurston's pen and traveling bone. The work of Maria Gimbutas requires a complex recipe of conversation across academic disciplines to even begin to unpack the fullness of its meaning. The exchange of information between archaeologists, linguists, mythologists, physical anthropologists, and ancient historians, artists, poets, scientists, and witches. She said, "There is a belief that religion cannot be reconstructed, that it's a waste of time to even speak of religion because archaeologists cannot do it. Maybe this is because they are not really trained. They are not interested in mythology at all and are just seeing the material culture. They don't want to see anything else. They think they are safe in reconstructing the ways of agriculture or how pottery was made, and that satisfies them. In our days, there are no people with vision. They cannot go across the border of their discipline. Archaeology now is interested mostly in excavation techniques, and they want to be very precise. The computer is used and all that. Of course, you can reach some conclusions using statistics, but if you do not have a vision as a person, if you are not also a poet or an artist, you cannot see much. You will just be a technician. And this is, in most cases, what happens." Back to Joan Martler. She wrote, "The Bronze Age is typified by the burials of dominant males with caches of weapons. Having traveled extensively in Eastern Europe to study the archaeological material, it was clear to Maria that something very different was happening before the Bronze Age, and she became impassioned to find out what that was. Although numerous excavations were being done on Neolithic sites, and she had studied every excavation report in its original language, No one had presented an overview to answer her questions, so she decided to conduct her own research and turned her attention to an in-depth investigation of the earlier Neolithic cultures. Fortunately, UCLA had money for such projects in those days, so between 1967 and 1980, Marija Gimbutas became project director of 5 major excavations of Neolithic sites in Southeast Europe. As long as Gimbutas was describing Bronze Age artifacts, she was considered a respected scholar. She soon realized, however, that in the earliest levels of excavation, there were no weapons of war or signs of male domination. It also became clear to her that descriptions of the material culture would not be enough. It would be impossible to understand the cultural development of the Neolithic period without acknowledging that an earth-based spirituality was central to every aspect of life. Therefore, she employed an interdisciplinary approach to scholarship, which she eventually called archaeomythology. Other researchers had noticed the relative peacefulness of these early societies, and the prevalence of female figurines. It was Marija, however, who had the audacity to speak of this imagery as sacred expressions of the deity in female form. She used the word goddess and spoke of it as all life in nature. If all this prehistoric goddess stuff is starting to sound familiar, maybe you caught our episode on Monica Sho, one of the patron saints of the Missing Witches podcast. She and her great cosmic mother co-author Barbara Marr were very inspired by Marija Gimbutas and mention her several times in the book. So here's an excerpt from Great Cosmic Mother. Finally, the snake came to symbolize the phallus, male sexual energy, which was understood to be originally contained inside the goddess, born from her and returning to her again, when, at the end of each world cycle, expansion, contraction, she curls up in a dark sleep. Though Upper Paleolithic images of copulation between men and women occur, icons and myths of the Great Mother do not show her actually mated with a human son lover until Middle Neolithic times, circa 5500 BC. At this time, and especially after the peak period of Catalhuyuk, which seems to have been a divorce of male attributes from the mother, and quite a phallic obsession developed, shown in representations of phallic cups, standing phallic stones, and ithphallic gods. Though pictures of shamans in trance with huge erections go far back into Upper Paleolithic. But these are not aggressive or misogynist phallic images. Rather, they seem to represent the phallus serving the goddess, women, and the life process of all. This is really shown in the tradition of goddess phallus stones, with goddess figures carved on phallic-shaped bones or rocks. This phallic form of the goddess is found continuously from the Paleolithic through the Neolithic and into the Proto-Urban period in Mesopotamia. Marija Gimbutas sees these goddess phallus icons deriving from the Old Stone Age, as suggesting the androgynous nature of the Great Mother. This is so. They also suggest the potential unity of the sexes in mutual love service before their disastrous splitting apart by patriarchal misogyny and puritanical sex codes. So Marija found statues with both male and female traits. Clay sculptures of plump women with phallic heads and folded arms. They are amazing works of art indeed, resembling both the feminine, bottom-heavy goddess and, to put it bluntly, dick and balls. This helped Marija to emphasize co-creation, that the great goddess is all, so of course exists as androgynous. Everything. Everything all at once. People are using the term non-binary a lot these days, and while you might understand what that means culturally, maybe you're not familiar with what the words themselves mean and how they're used. You've probably heard me say smash the binary in the same breath as smash the patriarchy, so I think it's worth going off on another one of our patented Missing Witches tangents to talk about the binary and how this term got worked into contemporary culture. When we say binary, we mean things that are opposites or set up in opposition to one another. Either this or that. In the language of computers, binary code, for example, there are only ones and zeros. Nothing else. Day, night, black, white, good, bad. But to view the world in only sets of thises and that's is, as we've seen over and over again, easy, uncomplicated, and deeply, deeply dangerous. It sets everything up as oppositional. Everything that is set up on one side of the binary is also equated with another binary, good, bad. Day and night are opposites, sure, but can we all agree that some of the most magical times are held in those blurred, spectral moments between the two? The dusk, the dawn, the in-between times. The binary we are almost always talking about when we use this term non-binary is man-woman. Some people feel trapped by society's expectation that we fit into one and only one of only two options, male or female. The binary says red or blue only, but I don't want to live in a world without purple. Purple is my favorite color. On the academic English lit tip of the binary discussion lies the concept of binary opposition. When I first learned about these deconstruction theories and movement, I felt like I had found a name for the cultural dissidence I felt like I was born with. They ask, does this mean what we think it means, or what we're supposed to think it means? Let's take this apart and see. And they proved with literary and cultural criticism that meaning, all meaning, is imposed by our reading. That humanity, that art, that meaning is not yes or no, but maybe, maybe, maybe. What do you think? And not just what does it mean, but how does it mean, and why does it mean, and can it mean something different? Ultimately, binary gender expression rules are all a bunch of baloney anyway. Historically, regular old manly men have worn everything from wigs to robes to kilts. The first high heels were made for men. Everyone has body hair. Okay. Except for those with alopecia, shout out to my hairless homies. Everyone has body hair. Pink is for girls and blue is for boys is a pretty recent marketing construct. So wear what you want, be who you want, choose your own name, impose your meaning onto the world, and more importantly, let's all work and strive to create a world where everyone is safe to do so. As I said, Marija often emphasized the egalitarian nature of the society she was theorizing. Matriarchal hierarchy structures, in her opinion, are the same as a patriarchal society, not the actual opposite. She wrote, "An egalitarian society is one without hierarchy." I'm going to say that again. An egalitarian society is without hierarchy. In The Living Goddess, she wrote clearly that while female form seems to dominate, this is simply because birth was a most sacred mystery. In fact, one of her most important discoveries was a birthing room, walls painted red. Marija was a feminist, certainly, but she was not, as some have accused, a skewed, man-hating revisionist. She wrote, "The female body, and particularly its generative parts, vulva, uterus, and womb, are predominant because the woman's body was regarded as parthenogenic, that is, creating life out of itself. The female body gives evidence of maternity, while the male body does not give evidence of paternity. The male element in symbolism was significant. Male animals and humans stimulate and enhance life, particularly plant growth. They are seen as an important part of the process of becoming, but do not actually create life. In Neolithic art and myth, the male deities appear as partners of the goddesses." In Marija's thinking, the role of the father in the creation of life in prehistoric antiquity may not have been valued only because it was not understood. Nonetheless, everyone was seen as having a valuable role. I want to take a second here to quote some of our Witches Found. Jackie Beaumont, and I'm paraphrasing here, finds it super problematic that Mother Earth is given, quote, feminine attributes. That femininity is painted as soft, non-aggressive, compliant, but Mother Earth is as destructive as she is creative. as rigid as she is supple, as terrifying as she is nurturing. And our found witch of the week, archaeologist Vanessa Olivier Lloyd, whose full interview you'll hear on Wednesday, reminded me that matriarchy isn't synonymous with peace. That an ancient matrilineal society of Quebec's First Nations people would capture men from other tribes to replace fallen warriors. What Gimbutas claims to have found was not matriarchal or hierarchical, but egalitarian. If we simply flip the binary instead of dismantling it, we will have solved nothing. We've pondered so many times, Risa and I, to each other and with you all here on the Missing Witches podcast about the nature of patriarchy and how it started and why. What happened? It's just like some baffling decisions got made at some point in prehistory that people and the earth should be conquered and subjugated, that women should be silent. And we've all seen some caveman cartoon of him whacking a cave woman over the head with a club and dragging her back to his cave. We've been led to believe that it's just always been that way. Man strong, woman weak. The female of the species forced into servitude to pay for her protection against a cruel world. Gimbutas is perhaps the closest I've come to getting some kind of answer to our question, has it always been this way? Well, Marija Gimbutas is here to say emphatically no. These pieces of 10,000-year-old evidence say different. It's a resounding no. It has not always been this way. A peaceful, earth-connected society is possible. An egalitarian society is, or at very least was, possible. Let me just stress this one more time. In her digs, Marija found thousands of artifacts, but not one weapon. Not a single tool of war. Let that sink in for a second. A society who was herding animals, practicing agriculture, creating pottery and art had no use for weapons. No concept of war. As we always say, when you go looking for witches, you find them everywhere. Wonderful, wacky, and wise witches. You can't research a witch without finding at least two more. I came upon an interview with Marija conducted earnestly and eagerly by a woman named Star Goody. It's a YouTube upload of a cable access program, a series that ran from 1986 till 1991 called The Goddess in Art. Captioned as, dedicated to the return of the goddess, the series explored the legacy of this oldest tradition in art as well as feminist spirituality in contemporary art. The moderator, Star Goody, interviewed scholars to uncover her, that's capital H, her, suppressed history and artists who were inspired by a radical reimagining of the feminine. The show is comical in its visual datedness, but that's what's so fun about it. It's like a time capsule that for me, as a child of the 80s, brings delightful waves of nostalgia, but still has relevance for me as a witch of the 21st century. In the archaeology of digging through the infinite strata of the internet, there are many, many treasures to discover, and the Goddess in Art series feels like a prize find to be placed among Marija's unearthed carvings in the continuing history of goddess worship. Please, witches, promise me that you'll check out Star Goody's YouTube channel. I'm sure by the time this airs, I'll have watched every episode. Linked in the show notes, as always. In her notes for the Marija episode, Star writes, one of the greatest scholars of the 20th century, Marija Gimbutas, through her work as an archaeologist, uncovered the symbolic language and provided a foundation for feminist spirituality. One of my favorite parts of the interview cum slideshow is the sound of Marija's voice as she speaks these words. The image of death is combined with the symbols of regeneration. That is continuous through time for millennia. In a way, Marija was the ultimate binary smasher. Male, female, past, future, life, death. In the afterword to The Living Goddesses, editor Miriam Robbins Dexter wrote, Marija concluded this, her final book, with the goddesses, gods, and spirits of the Balts. It is perhaps fitting that she ended this book with a long section on Lithuanian folklore, since it was the Baltic goddesses, particularly the Latvian and from the Lithuanian with whom she had felt a kinship since her childhood. Throughout her life, her native country, its folklore, language, and customs remained foremost in her heart. When she was a child, she learned of the Lithuanian goddesses, gods, and spirits, honored even in the early part of the 20th century. These deities peopled the landscape of her spirit, enriching her love for the land, waters, flowers, trees. Marija Gimbutas was an ecologist decades before the word became popularized, and her home in the hills of Topanga, California reflected her love of nature. This love became a foundation stone in her own philosophy of life and her personal spirituality. In the last decade of life, Marija Gimbutas' own ecological and spiritual beliefs found resonance in the growing spiritual and ecological movements in the United States and abroad. Her books, as well as her presence, became a strong focus in ecological movements, so much so that many people, perhaps without intending to, learned quite a bit of archaeology. Marija Gimbutas' philosophies, describing a world where men and women might live in harmony with one another and with their environment, found a home in the hearts of thousands of people, helping to shape the ideas of a new generation of ecologists. Women and men in the fields of ecological science, anthropology, folklore, and mythology, as well as archaeology, have been touched and transformed by the works of Marija Gimbutas. Marija has had a lot of detractors over the years. Every strong woman is a witch and is hunted, right? I've seen her work described as off the wall, eccentric, hippie, and even horse feathers. One of her biggest and most scornful critics was Colin Renfrew, a geneticist who claimed that such a large ancient society as Marija suggested, based on her findings of reoccurring symbols and so on, was impossible. Turns out, it just took a while for science to catch up to what Marija Gimbutas already knew. We now have the technology to analyze DNA, to map and trace genetics. So in 2017, Colin took to the stage at the University of Chicago and declared, "Marija's hypothesis has been magnificently vindicated." Marija was right. She is said to have told a colleague that it might take decades, but eventually the value of her work would be recognized. In a letter she wrote to her old Lithuanian college professor, she said, "I planted my seed as well as I could." And that goes for you too, witches, with your planting seeds of crazy ideas. It might take decades. You may not even live to see how you change the world. You may never know how the magic of you can ripple waves into the future. So plant your seed as well as you can. Live your truth, even if no one gets you right now, and make it easier for others to live theirs. On that note, I'd like to leave you for today with some advice from Marija, and I hope her words will resonate with you and shake you out of preconceptions of prehistory and headlong into the present and future of our civilization and of your brand new day on this ancient earth. Don't be sheep. Do what you want to do. It's very important to be mobilized, to have determination to do what is meaningful. If you feel a need to do something, you must do it.
You must be a witch.
Season 3 of the Missing Witches podcast is brought to you by Foxglove Farm. Use offer code Missing Witches at checkout.